Hey, welcome back to the show. We've got another episode of Records and Riffs for you today. And last time we did Metallica's No Life Till Leather demo, and it was just really fun. You guys seem to really enjoy that sort of style of video, and look, it's refreshing for me to do. So this week I thought we'd come back in episode 2 with Megadeth's debut album of Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. So just quickly before I go through all the notes and start talking about the album, just for a gear rundown, I've got my Dean Select Vengeance V with Seymour Duncan Thrash Factor pickups in it. I absolutely love this guitar, it's just so cool. And that's going through the Headfirst Evil Joe. And I'm actually utilising the Plexi setting on the Evil Joe, and I didn't really try it out when I did an amp test with it the other week, but I'm just blown away how cool this Plexi sounds. It's better than any other Plexi I've heard, I'm not going to lie about that. And going through the front end of that, I've just got my Master Effects Nerve Agent mid boost, and that's just really cool, and it adds a little tiny bit on the top just to really thicken up the mids exactly where we want them to be, and just gives that little bit more of an attack, just like a... If I turn it off, you can hear it just sort of thickens things up and just makes it a little tiny bit more sort of metal sounding, but that's all it is. It's just really subtle, and usually I use it with like an overdrive behind it just to really sculpt and force things out and choose the mids that I want, but on its own with a Plexi, it's like God tier, it's amazing. And that signal's just been sent through to my 2 Notes Reload 2, where I'm sending 2 mono signals into Logic via my audio interface. And that's going through 2 Notes Genome software, where I'm just emulating 2 different cabinets. A Dave Mustaine Mega Stack with V30s on one side, and a Marshall Brit C Vintage cabinet with V30s on the other. They sound slightly different. Both have an SM57 pushed up to it in the software. And I know that it's not what Dave Mustaine used back in Killing Is My Business, but to me it's a great sounding sort of IR. And it's just something I'm accustomed to, but it just sounds really cool. And that's my whole chain. And that just leaves us now to talk about Megadeth's Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. And this is just such an amazing debut album, so far ahead of its time. It's so difficult to play. I think it's harder than Rust in Peace for me. Some of those riffs, I just can't get my head around exactly how to play them. There's just so much feel and like speed and aggression and intensity. It's like, I don't know how they actually did it back in the day, but I'm just going to read some of the notes and some of the things that I've just researched about this album, and it's just so cool. But essentially, Dave was fired from Metallica on April 11th, 1983, and that really is just the timeline that I want to talk about, as they went on to getting signed and recording Killing Is My Business on June 12th, 1985. And I wrote, it's an absolute effort that speaks volumes about his character and determination. As he was quoted, "I want blood." So a little bit of the history about it. Killing Is My Business was recorded under the label of Combat Records at Inigo Ranch, Malibu, California, and Crystal Sound Labs in Hollywood from December 84 through to Jan of 85. The budget was 8Ks but blew out to 12 and came in with 8 tracks, just under 32 minutes. And the members on the album: Dave Mustaine on lead vocals and guitar, Dave Ellefson on bass, backing vocals, Chris Poland on guitar, lead guitar, and Gar Samuelson on drums. And that lineup to me is just so iconic, and the sound of that whole lineup together just had a totally different sound of Megadeth. It's like they were their own band, and they just sounded full and complete, and it was like speed metal, jazz infused rock. It was just so cool for this and Peace Sells, but totally different sound than Megadeth had like later on with Marty Friedman. It's almost like we got 2 bands out of it, but that lineup was absolutely stellar and so far ahead of their time. And for anyone interested in trying to play some of these songs, the tuning is slightly lower than 440. If you set your tuner to about 433 Hertz, you'll just be right on the ballpark if you tune standard. So the timeline, as I mentioned before, was absolutely crazy, and it just blows my mind considering how complex these songs are. But Dave leaves Metallica in April of 83, and by March of 84, he'd formed the band and they'd released the Last Rites demo, which was Last Rites, the Mechanix, Skull Beneath the Skin, and These Boots. And then the final album was released on June 12th, 1985. It was remastered again in 2002, and then it was redone again for the Final Kill in 2018. And so those 3 different iterations of it, but the Final Kill that was released in 2018, to me it just had the coolest sounding mix. Like, it just sounded so heavy, the drums, the guitars, the bass, like Dave's vocals were killer in it. And I can actually hear all the guitar parts, so I can try and learn to play it properly. But the earlier one, I really found it hard to like hear what Dave was doing on the guitar, and his vocals sounded like they were in a different room, like washing in and out. It was sort of crazy, but As far as commercial success, it didn't make the charts on the Billboard 200, but has since been re-evaluated as an essential classic leading the way in thrash metal genre. So far it's sold around 254,000 copies. Other albums that were released that year that you might be aware of was Exodus's Bonded by Blood, Slayer's Hell Awaits, and Anthrax Spreading the Disease. And as far as the album art goes, it was really intended to have the actual artwork depicting a sketch that Dave Mustaine did of Vic Rattlehead, and Combat lost the sketch and ended up photographing a plastic skull with tinfoil and tomato sauce. The artwork was rectified in 2002 release, how Dave intentionally wanted it done to start with. And I look back at that artwork, even the logo of Megadeth just doesn't even read the same, but I can't even think of any bands in that era that had really good artwork on their debut albums. Like Anthrax's Fistful of Metal was probably the best one, and even then that had like two right hands punching that guy through the back of the head. They're all sort of horror shows in their own way, but I think that's how thrash debut albums are meant to be. And my notes on that, I guess it's just part of the history that proves how good the music was. I would have thought there would be more writing on the coattails of Iron Maiden, as that art was unreal and ahead of its time, but it proves they were all in their own creative headspaces on the forefront of something new. So I really hope I didn't bore you with too much of the pre-album waffle, but they're all sort of interesting, useless facts that's just fun to talk about. So here we go, track 1, Last Rites Love to Death. And I think this is the first album that I can think of that had like that full sort of neo-classical opening before like the metal fury starts. And this was based on Bach's Toccata in D minor with that whole piano sort of thing going on. And I saw video footage of them playing this live in 1986, and they actually played it all with their instruments. It was just so cool. It had that whole tapping thing going on, like the... In that live concert footage, go look it up, it's just so cool. Dave Ellison joins in with the bass. It's just such an epic sort of start to any concert. They should actually play that song a lot more live, but I think it would just be so hard. It's just such an intense song, those rhythms and timings, and then it goes straight into that intro riff, which is just like really difficult. I'll just see what my notes say about that, but to me that's one of the hardest Megadeth riffs ever to try and play. That whole song, the timing and just the way it jumps around, it's just so difficult to play. Killer opening riff, so fast and aggressive. Even the verse riff behind the vocals is so complex. A lot of music for one song jammed into 4 minutes and 55. The lyrics are everything you expect from a cut snake. His performance is really good. He doesn't snarl too much, and his voice sounds really natural and much richer than later records. More straight up and without sounding like that thrash goblin. Honest, hungry, very pissed. It's just such a crazy opener. You watch him play it live in that video and I'm just blown away how good Dave Mustaine can sing over the top of that. I can't even just play those riffs. I can't understand the timing and everything like that. It's just so cool. But anyway, that leaves us on to the second track, number 2, Killing Is My Business. And this is the best song on the album for me. It's with the coolest riffs. You'd better believe it. You know, it's just so cool. An intense 3 minutes and 8 seconds. I love the guitar tones all through this, really similar to No Love to Leather, but a little warmer and less gain. You can tell by the opening feedback that it's just really loud. The drum and bass gel really well and feel really locked into each other, and this album seems to have a maturity about it in all areas that definitely doesn't sound like it was conceived in a year, and that timeline blows my mind still. Dave's playing was just so good back then. I don't know how he actually learned to play the guitar so well, so young, and sound so mature and have all these different elements to his playing. It's just really cool. In all the interviews and everything I've ever heard, he's never actually spoke about how hard he worked to try and work on his craft and how much effort he put into it, but it's just amazing to me. But it's the track that I opened the show with today, and it's just so cool. I love that fade in, the whole tone. And I absolutely just love playing that riff. It's my favourite one to play on the album, and just going through this whole tone, this whole plexi sort of feel. It's clean, but at the same time it's just so heavy and dirty. And then it steps up after a little while into that really cool riff, and I absolutely love this too. That So anyway, getting on to track 3, which is Skull Beneath the Skin, and I just think this is a fantastic opener to a song, just that whole sort of neoclassical sort of picking thing. It's got a different feel and groove with a really great drum track. The whole song feels more of a progression leading into what would be on Peace Sells. I think it's just got that whole sort of driving force. But again, this song's just really difficult to play. I'm just going to keep saying this, but it's all those little subtle nuances about it, and just the way that they make the amplifier work and make the sound it just sounds so cool. And I actually really struggle to think why, after all these years and how iconic this is, that no one's actually sat down and tried to work it all out and like make up a proper tab book for it that's all correct. That'd just be so cool. It'd blow my mind. But a couple of the favourite riffs off this, I just really love after that whole ascending part at the start and the song just like gets in. It really just reminds me of that part in Wayne's World where they do the extreme close-up. You know, you'll just hear it. He's like, whoa! And you get the idea there. It's just such a cool song to play. They all really are. But anyway, next track 4, this brings us to Rattlehead. And this is an awesome song. These classics would be nuts to hear live. Probably the closest song on the album to what was on Kill 'Em All. And I say that because I think it's just got that similar sort of just go nuts live vibe. He's not sitting there just like pissed off, spitting out venom. He's actually like talking about just like go nuts. And in my notes I've just said it's aimed at diehard metalheads just to go nuts, be themselves and rebel, capturing that reckless energy. And to me that's everything that like Kill 'Em All was sort of putting out, that whole early Metallica sort of vibe from the No Life Till Leather. All the songs there, they just seem to just really about just like rebel and have fun, go nuts, just go off in the live shows. And this is the first song of Megadeth that really sort of captures that similar vibe. So Just to me, maybe Dave wrote a little bit prematurely before Megadeth. I don't know. It's just the way that I think about it, I suppose. But it's the song that brought Vic Rattlehead to life, representing the whole see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. The metal plates bolted to his eyes and ears, and his mouth was just sewn shut with those metal wires. And the whole point of that mascot is just like a rebellious stand about government censorship and control. And I just think it's really cool. It's an iconic opening riff and a heavy groove center section chant riff. It reminds me of what's to come on like Wake Up Dead, and that whole intro there, it's just so cool. It's just so cool. But then we get to that chant riff that reminds me of Wake Up Dead, or Wake Up Dead reminds me of this chant riff. It's that. It's just so epic, and then it even gets to that more of like the driving sort of riff later on, that And again, it's just so much fun to play all these riffs. They're just so cool with this tone, just to really sort of dig in and pedal down and just like get the most out of your guitar. You don't just play these songs like with high distortion and just really choking and mute the strings. You've got to like use all your guitar skills, and your hands actually make the tone on this. It's unreal. But anyway, I should have said earlier, but for anyone with a Quad Cortex or a Cortex Nano, I made a capture of this entire tone. It came out really nice. It's like, it's hard to distinguish which is that like the real amp and which is the Cortex, and just captured it beautifully. But all that's on the Cortex Cloud under Lamp Chopper 678, and there's so many different ones to get there. But anyway, back into it, track 5. This brings us to side B of the record. So this is the opening track on side B, The Chosen Ones. And this is a song inspired by Monty Python's Holy Grail, mocking the idea of being a chosen one. The song itself starts with an iconic groove that quickly turns into chaotic Megadeth. Definitely a predecessor for what comes later in So Far, So Good, So What. And it's got similar stops and starts in one of the riffs that's similar to like In My Darkest Hour off that album. And I'll go through that later. It's just so cool. And it's got loads of other riffs that share the similar formula that's very Megadeth. Anyway, this is the opening riff for that. And then it just gets into that part that reminds me of the whole Darkest Hour, that. So hard to play those sorts of parts with very little distortion, but it really reminds me of In My Darkest Hour for that center section part. You know, that whole sort of chromatic run, it's got that little flurry of notes, and then like the next riff, it's extremely Megadeth and so cool. Anyway, next it brings us to track 6, which is Looking Down the Cross. And this, again, slowed down doomy intro with lyrics based on the classic betrayal, sacrifice and suffering. So Megadeth, so Dave Mustaine. To be condemned when it's known you are innocent. It's a classic way to write a song. Totally unexpected chords and progression in the verse riff, but then it gets into one of the best riffs ever after the ascending chords. We'll talk about that whole thing. I'll just play that opening riff, the doomy sort of intro. And that is just so cool. It's got those really weird sort of voicing chords, like the jazzy. Back into that whole ascending riff, but I really love that riff after that ascending riff. It just takes you into that weird sort of... Again, it's just such a cool riff. You could really just sit on these riffs all day and just really dissect them and work them out. There's like a lot of palm muting going on there that just really makes it sound so thin and weird, but at the same time it's so cool and clear, and the record is amazing, the playing that they had on that. But next brings us to the Mechanix track 7. I've made no notes about this, but we all know it's the track that went down and was written with Metallica for the No Life to a Leather demo. Dave Mustaine just stepped it right up for this album just to really prove his point that they're heavier and faster and nastier. He kept the whole gas station lyrics about like getting things done with women and stuff that come in to get their motors serviced in their cars, and like it's just how it was, I guess. But I get it, when they stepped it up on the album, they just wanted it to be harder and faster. But to me, it's just sped up so quick that it makes the song almost like lose its identity a little bit. I think just playing it at the right speed, the right tempo, it just sounds so much better to me. But again, it's a really cool riff and it just sounds so cool. Absolutely epic song. We spoke about it a fair bit more with the No Life to Leather. I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, brings us to the very last track on the album, which is track 8, And These Boots. And this really is just such a controversial song for Dave Mustaine and his Megadeth career. But so as my notes go, this is a cover song about the iconic These Boots that's got a jazzy backbeat, but quickly digresses into thrash punk speed metal with Mustaine spitting venom on everything. It was originally written by Lee Hazelwood, but Nancy Sinatra made it famous in 1966. Lee initially approved the cover without hearing the Megadeth rendition. And then years later she found out what became of her song and withdrew the permission, stating it was vile and offensive. She went on to suing Megadeth and Capitol Records for an unknown amount, and apparently it was settled behind closed doors. The song was apparently removed on some vinyl pressings in the later 90s and 2000s. In 2002 on the remastered edition, Dave's voice is bleeped out, making the track pretty unlistenable. They sort of left it in there, that was cool, but every time he just went to sing it was just like this whole bleep going on. You could hear all the background music, but the vocals was totally unlistenable. It sort of ruined the song in the sense for that 2002, but at least they didn't remove it completely from the remaster, but they might as well have. It really made it unlistenable. But then when The Final Kill was released in 2018, Megadeth managed to keep the track in its altered lyric with a cheeky disclaimer in the notes distancing the band from the lyric. Apart from that, it captures some fine guitar playing from Chris Poland. I think it really just has that whole jazz-influenced intro. It just suits him to a T. It's perfect, and it's got that thrash sort of demeanour about it. But it opens just with that classic sort of, you know, that whole blues sort of shuffle thing going on. But then it digresses and gets into the... And then Dave gets singing the... I never really liked that song being on the album. I always thought it was better without, but after knowing the backstory and just like researching it and looking into it, it's a whole lot cooler in my book now. But there you have it, guys. That's the whole killing is my business and business is good. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. I put a lot of work going into it and just researching everything, having so much fun and learning all those riffs. And thanks to Jason at Head First Amplification, letting me borrow his Evil Joe amp for all these last few weeks. It's been loads of fun to have on the show and so many different tones, and this is without a doubt the coolest plexi tone I've ever been able to dial in, and it just works so well with that Nerve Agent boost. Master Effects, I'll have links in the description for those things. The Nerve Agent boost is absolutely killer. It just works so good with overdrives, and you can just focus in those mids exactly where you want them. Really just brings those frequencies to life with your guitar amp. But I really hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I'm not sure what we'll be back with next time on the show, but records and riffs, I don't know. We'll work it out. But until then, take care. Bye-bye.